now you're taking the description in verse 8 in Revelation 21:8, and you are seeing it on a much bigger scope.
The different type of people described here. See, look, God's given everyone a free gift of life.
Yeah, he's talking about the inner man or woman in their heart. What comes out, or what lurks in the heart, is bad.
And I just wanted to show you that it's not about physical fear; it is spiritual fear.
God doesn't want us to be, worshiping Him out of fear. He wants to worship us out of love, and the choice we have is our free choice. So how loving of God.
Welcome everyone to our meeting. It was so nice to see all of you today again. I hope you will enjoy this segment, whether here or online later on. But we are continuing with Revelation chapter 21, and we haven't talked about verse 8. We're talking about the new earth and new heaven, and particularly New Jerusalem. And we have not discussed verse 8 last time, and I think it's important to do this. So we will talk about verse 8 together. So we'll get someone to read it and then discuss the meaning of that. These types of behavior is not going to be in the new heaven and the new earth.
Yeah, I got it there.
Okay.
But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, all have their part burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
All right, so we have a confirmation that God is saying this celestial community, the believers, the New Jerusalem, assuring us that certain things are not going to be in there. And if we just get your comment on the fact that not the fearful and the unbelieving and the detestable will not be there. Any comment on this? And how do we look at that exactly? Are we talking about just a type of people and their traits, or what are we talking about? I'll draw your attention to the word study by Helps, which says this word fearful is delos, is derived from fear driven. You notice that? So it's fear driven. It's not, we're not talking about, are we talking about regular fear? Let's say fear of a storm coming and you have to hide, fear of a lightning and you have to go somewhere. We're not talking about this. We're talking about a different type of fear. Okay. And the study says it describes a person who loses their moral fortitude that is needed to follow the Lord, causing someone to be faint-hearted or cowardly to Christ. Can you make the connection now that what kind of fear or cowardly attitude we're talking about?
Yeah, so what I want to say is, as we've looked at before, hellfire, God doesn't torture, God is love. So we're not first of all talking about this. The different type of people described here. See, look, God's given everyone a free gift of life. We make choices, we have a choice what we do with our life. But there are ones here, different ones described, but they all come under the same camp in God's eyes, who do not inherit everlasting life. So it doesn't matter if we're, as it says, if we're someone who practices magic arts, or murderer, or someone who's unbelieving. Okay, the outcome is the same, which is once we've had this free gift of life, then that's it. God shakes our hand and says, well, okay, then if we're not interested in anything of the future with God, then that's fine.
Right. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, so God doesn't want us to be, worshipping him out of fear. He wants to worship us out of love, and the choice we have is our free choice. So how loving of
Certainly.
God.
It is, yeah. He gives life, and you have a chance of your length of life to choose and prove that you want him. So what God hates the most here, as it is listed in verse 8, cowardly or the fearful, some translation would say. And I just wanted to show you that it's not about physical fear, it is spiritual fear. And you probably have met some people that they hear the Christ message, they hear the gospel, they hear everlasting life, but they're so afraid to make the change. They hesitate. They hesitate a lot. Some of us can take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Some people will take a whole lifetime. Although they have been exposed to the message, they feel something that is liberating about, but the flesh is still taking them on a different ride. And these are the fearful ones. They're afraid to give up. I just wanted to show you this in Matthew 16:20. I'll get someone to read that because it has a connection with the fact of what kind of fear is that? Is he talking about in Matthew 16:25?
For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it.
Whoever or wants to save his life will lose it. So what Jesus is saying, you need to lose your old nature, your life in this now that is anyway gonna go and come to me. This is how you're gonna gain it. But you know what? This is a lot easier said than done. You tell people about all the details of what God is having in store for them, and they hesitate. They don't believe you. And some will say, well, I know, but I got a lot on my mind. Now, I think this is the fearful he's talking about. I mean, we all probably had that kind of fear and cowardice attitude. But thankfully, we came to realize that we need to not be fearful and jump with him, right? Another time, we know that in Revelation 12, it talks about the saints, they loved not their life. Remember that? The saints, they loved not their life. They have the testimony of Christ, and they also did not love their life. We're not talking about people that hate their life. No, they did not love their old life. They gave it up to gain the new life. If we don't do this, God will consider us as the fearful one or the coward.
Yeah, I guess what God is saying is, look, you've got to be in it to win it, and he wants to see what our priorities in life are. We've got to earn a living, we've got to look after a family and so on. But are we taking the time out to look for something greater? Why are we here? Who put us here? Is there a greater power? Is there like someone who loves us? What's the purpose of our life? What's the life beyond this life, and so on? What are we searching? Because even when we looked in Noah's day, God said it was the ones who took no note of God They were eating, drinking, men marrying, and so on, doing the business of the day. Then the flood came and they lost out because they
Right.
took no note.
Liking. And then it talks about other traits, you know, the murderer and immoral, the sorcerers, idolaters. Now, these are not just to be taken in the literal sense, in my opinion, but they have a very deep spiritual meaning as well. Okay. I'll show you one verse, probably in my notes there. The first one is from 1 John 3:15, where it says, whoever hates his brother is a murderer. So did you see that? Is he just talking about people that literally kill other people?
It's
No,
the
he-
heart no.
Yeah, he's talking about the inner man or woman in their heart. What comes out, or what lurks in the heart, is bad.
That's
And
right.
is this is the type of thing that God condemns, having a murderous heart.
Yeah,
Having a,
absolutely.
yeah.
So if I have that in my heart, God considers me a spiritual murderer, and I would be included in the list in verse 8. There's another one in Hebrews 12 where it says, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau. Esau, the one that sold his inheritance for a bowl of soup, right?
Right.
But he calls him a fornicator. Now, don't let your mind go to a fornication like sexual matters. He's not talking about this, okay? In fact, some people that have sexual problems this is one of the least problems God looks at. He looks at people that are proud and self-righteous, people that sell their spiritual inheritance for, let's say, material things. Okay? God doesn't like that. He doesn't have a lot of problems with people that have physical problems, okay? Or things to overcome personally. He's got a big problem. This is why it calls Esau a fornicator, because what is a fornicator? Is someone who sells himself. If you go to the Greek word, that means he's a seller of self. He sold his spiritual inheritance for nothing. And God calls him a fornicator. So this is the same word that's used in verse 8 here. So any of us that is going to give up things that are given to us, we can be in that list easily. Okay. And another one.
Yeah, there's like idolaters. It says idolaters. It's
Yeah.
not just literally carving an image, you know, a stone and bowing down to it.
Right.
Anything can be idolatry that replaces our direct worship to God. It could be a love of fame, football, just simple pleasures of life that we devote a lot of our attention to, that is not spiritual or God, can become idolatry.
Nice. So you see that now you're taking the description in verse 8 in Revelation 21:8, and you are seeing it on a much bigger scope, because previously people said, oh, you are a sexually fornicating person, you're not in the kingdom of God. He's not really meaning that precisely. I'm not condoning that behavior, but I'm just showing you that there's more serious stuff we need to look at, and a lot of so-called believers and Christians are doing that, and God hates that attitude. That's not in his new Jerusalem, the community of true believers, holy and pure. Another verse, it says, for by thy sorceries were all the nations deceived, speaking of Babylon the Great. Now, the sorceries here are false teaching. So by your false teachings, all the nations have been deceived. So am I among those who have sorcery, like to have false beliefs and spread them? God says, you're not going to be in my New Jerusalem. No, you're not going to be. So we're not just talking about people that use witchcraft in literal sense, okay? We're not talking about this. You may have a brother or sister or someone having a problem with drugs there or alcohol. I'm not condoning that, but we're not really talking about this as much as we're talking about a much bigger scope of false teachings that is called in the Bible spiritually called sorcery. Okay, it's not exactly pharmakia as some people like to understand it. So this basically verse 8 opens up just a new way of looking at the traits in believers that God is removing out completely. So this new community are pure unholy. So it's not just about physical problems. It's a really deep spiritual ingrained problem because it comes packed with sin. And God is taking that out. Sin has a big package, and when he takes it out, these traits are gone as well with it, and it's deep inside man. You may have noticed some very nice looking people, but when you get to know their heart and their mind, it's quite dark. And you may have seen someone with like maybe problems of alcoholism. They're very nice and they're, humble. It's just they got this one little problem. We don't want to pick on these people. Okay? They have a problem and God will help them somehow if with this. But he looks more at the heart. So we're going to stop here. It's just so nice that we discussed verse 8. And we want to thank you so much. I'm going to have to stop the recording and we will continue with part 2 later on.